Good morning.
Well, good morning. It seems like we have been here before.
It does seem like we've been here before, but I gotta say, hey, Ashley,
Hi.
I, you know, I think we are at the moment in the pandemic when I start to get weepy. I was just reflecting for a moment here about how happy I am to be leading worship with you folks this morning. I don't know if I got a chance to say this, but you two are some of my dearest co-conspirators in the work of Holy Mischief. And I'm just really excited to be here with you. So, Ashley, I don't know if we told you this, but as we are coming in, inviting folks in, we invite folks to say good morning in the chat, to let us know where they're joining us from. And we invite those of us that are on the screen to respond to a question.
Okay.
And the question I was thinking about this morning, I was like, what do I want to ask you to? The question that I was thinking about this morning is this: what is the soundtrack of your life recently? What is the music that is helping you get through this particular moment of the pandemic? For me, I have been listening to a playlist. I had to pull up Spotify for this. I've been listening to a playlist called Songs for Warmth Seeking, Volume 1 by Hanif Abdurraqib. Y'all may be familiar with some of his other work, but it is a sort of a self-described, like, this playlist is for those people living in the upper Midwest right now who are freezing their butts off and trying to make it through the winter. So I offer that question to you all. What are you listening to right now that is kind of helping you get through this little patch of the pandemic that we're in?
What you got, Julica?
Actually, I had a very funny reaction. More than ever, I just want to turn everything off. Could please everyone be quiet? Like, my children have wonderful taste in music and they listen to all these interesting things, but as soon as I can, I don't want a soundtrack. I don't want music. I like, can you turn the television down? Could we sit in the car silently for a while? Like, I just need to be quiet. So the silence is the soundtrack right now that I crave the most.
That's awesome. What about you, Ashley?
Yeah, we all have been quarantining with COVID in my house for the last week and a half, as I know Julica and Arif know, but we're all okay. But let's just say that that silent soundtrack sounds really good to me too. But instead, what it is actually a lot of children's music. There have been so many Bob the Train and Laurie Berkner Band moments. But my antidote is that I had to take an unexpected road trip a couple of weeks ago to go help a family member. And I remembered one of my favorite songs by the Mountain Goats from many years ago. And the song is aptly titled, "I Am Going to Make It Through This Year If It Kills Me." And so I created a playlist themed with that. And it's really just full of sort of like 90s and early 2000s comfort food for me.
That sounds amazing. And folks are adding in the chat, yes, if you have a favorite song, a favorite artist, that is a favorite genre of music that is helping you get through, feel free to add that in the chat. Why don't we go ahead and get started here, friends? So good morning, First Universalist Church. It is so good to be together this morning in all the ways that we can. Here at First Universalist Church, we believe in the transformative power of love and hope, of giving, receiving, and growing together. We are a faith community that listens deeply to where love is calling us next. We welcome, affirm, and protect the light in each human heart. We act for justice with humility, courage, and compassion, and we do all of this as a faith community that is committed to ending oppression in all its forms and building the beloved community of liberation, joy, and belonging for all of us. There are lots of ways to get connected here. You can check out our virtual order of service. There should be a link to that in the chat right there. So you can check out our virtual order of service. You can also find that on our website. Just click on the link for this service and the order of service is right there on that page. You can sign up to receive our weekly newsletter to learn more. You can join us Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. for worship, short midweek worship, and you can join us next Sunday for worship as well. Friends, a word on where we are as a church in the midst of the pandemic. You might notice that we are gathering at a different time than in weeks past, and that we are 100% online instead of online and in person. While the rates of COVID infections are higher, we have paused our in-person worship. We paused it for this Sunday, and by midweek, we will determine what next Sunday will look like, and we will let you know by email and on our website. If and when we reopen for in-person worship, please know that you can always join us online, and we hope that you join us in the way that is right for you. I also want to let you know that after the service today, our First Step class will be meeting online via Zoom. First Step is a short orientation to the church and to Unitarian Universalism. It is led by one of our members, and it is a great way to get a bit more connected and learn more about the congregation. And so, as we gather and prepare to worship together, we remember that the land we live on here in Minneapolis, here in the Twin Cities, holds the stories of generations, stories of suffering and resilience, the pain of genocide and stolen land and stolen lives. We commit to learning and telling the multiple stories of this land and our shared history, and to creating a present and a future of love and justice for all. And so as we make our hearts and minds ready for this time of worship, I invite you into our practice of 3 intentional breaths, breathing all the way in and all the way out at your speed as we move into this time of worship.
There is a moment before dawn when the night is firmly in charge of the sky. There is no arguing with the opacity that holds both a fertile imagination and cover of destruction. Just hold on. There is the moment when the dream we share is newly born, wet and wriggling in our hands. Sometimes it's true that salvific futures look vulnerable and small before us. We remain unsure. Just hold on. Anything good was small at first. You know that Dr. King said, "I have a dream." It definitely was not the "I have a reality" speech. It was real in a different way that could be felt, that could be shared. They held on. That dreaming speech happened in August 1963. And you know what came before was April, a letter from a Birmingham jail. One moment did inform the other, but the future being built could not be known with certitude. They held on. We gather Unitarian Universalists certain only of our power to be human, finding ourselves committed to keeping our word and being our covenant. And when we fail to keep our promises, we don't throw them away, labeled as impossible. We take up our courage. We begin again. We hold on. Sprinkled in the wind, we can hear the question, if we are not white supremacy shaped into religious robes and rituals, then who are we? We are present, both in attention and in the answer. We are here. We hold on. We contain multitudes, not just of questions and contradictions, but also of possibilities. We continue to labor for the creation of community in which all of us, not just each, but every part of us, is welcome in our home of faith. We hold on. Let us worship together.
Please join me in saying the words for lighting our chalice. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
So, for our time for our ages, beloveds, I'm going to invite Ashley and Arif back on screen. But really, I want to have a conversation with you in the chat. Arif and Ashley are here as my backup support people in case no one says anything. But that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. You're going to, right? Right? Okay. And what we're going to do during this time for all ages is we're going to talk about what we remember learning about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and how and when we learned it. And I would love to speak with the youth and the children in our congregation. So if you are online today, worshiping with your family, get one of your parents or get yourself to the keyboard, because I want to hear what it is that you remember learning about Dr. King and when you learned it. Where did the story of Dr. King first come to you? And I would especially love to hear from our Black, Indigenous, and multiracial youth and children and families. This is called a progressive stack. When you center the voices of people who have a particular lived experience and you let them go first in a conversation, that's a progressive stack. And I would like to progressively stack our conversation. So in the chat, especially if you are a person of color, a youth of color, I would love to hear, what did you learn about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and how and where? And in the meantime, I'm going to ask you, Arif, what do you remember learning?
That is a great question. I was just thinking about that. I was like, what did I learn? You know, I grew up in a family, a long line of organizers and activists in India. So I think I actually learned about Gandhi and the Brahmo Samaj and other movements for justice in India long before I had learned anything about Dr. King. I think that my earliest lessons were in school, and they were they were initially centered around the "I Have a Dream" speech, which was then complexified by family members and much later my own research, my own learning.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I see that Ali is also echoing that in the chat. The character of a person and not their race, one of the central messages from that "I Have a Dream" speech. Absolutely. How about you, Ashley?
Yeah, I had a fairly exceptional experience learning about MLK for a white kid growing up in America. I went to J.J. Hill, which then became Capitol Hill over in St. Paul, growing up, and started my school career with a strong, powerful Black woman principal, Dolores Henderson, who some of you may be familiar with if you've lived here in the Twin Cities a long time. And her leadership marked the character of the whole school in a way that I still can't quite tease out, but was extremely formative for me. So, I grew up with we sang "Lift Every Voice and Sing" I knew all of those words at 8 years old, right? And we would have a Black History Month assemblies, including one of those gatherings, right, about Dr. King. And we, folks would, read or represent various other characters from that era. And, but there was like an Ella Baker and a King and a Bayard Rustin and and I feel like I got a much more sort of robust and nuanced version of that. And I still continue to learn things because even with that sort of expanded version, the popular culture has this like very flat, very like two-dimensional version of the civil rights movement with King at the front.
Yes.
How are you, Julica, or maybe the chat?
Yeah, I see in the chat that there is a lot of arresting folks for Blacks' rights to be allowed into restaurants and stores. Yeah, that was the hard work of the civil rights movement, was to actually push the envelope and say, no, we're actually going to do this, even though we're not supposed to. I remember very vividly in the movie The Butler, watching the young people prepare for those actions and the interactions that they had with each other in advance so that they could really strengthen themselves and sit through the abuse that they put up with. Very, very powerful. I don't remember how I learned about Dr. King. I grew up in Mexico, and I have always known about Dr. King. I don't know why. I don't know when or how. One thing that I do recognize, speaking of the flat, like just one-dimensional, is that when I first learned about the civil rights movement, I learned that Dr. King was good and Malcolm X was bad.
Yeah.
That there was a good way to do change and a bad way to do change. And I think that's very interesting too. I think that there's a lot there to unpack about how we have over time told a story about Dr. King that, in fact, at the time, I don't think he was considered the good one. And I think it was very, very complicated.
And that story is used all the time now to say, well, Black Lives Matter should be acting more like that nice civil rights movement, which never actually existed, but that story is used to talk about the kind of respectability of what a movement should look like.
Right, because the nonviolent approach was only from one side. It was not a nonviolent march. It wasn't the journey of nonviolence was putting up with all of the violence coming at Black people. So yeah, absolutely. I see in the chat, yes, a couple of people agree, and they learned that MLK was more of a hero than Malcolm X. Lisa's father marched with Dr. King in '63. That's pretty powerful. Cool. Yeah. Anything else? What else do you notice from the chat? I think that's it. So thank you for participating in the conversation. Oh yes, you're right, Dallas. MLK was all about race, but really he talked a lot about poverty, especially at the end. He was really, really pushing for a complex and intersectional understanding of oppression. Absolutely.
And militarization, those three pillars are what he talked about.
That's right.
Money, race, violence.
Yep. Well, I thank you all for participating in this first part of our conversation. Later on, you'll have another opportunity to participate in the chat. And, oh, yep, the Vietnam War, exactly. Oh, and the truth about how Rosa Parks was really well planned. It wasn't a sudden thing. Yeah, that's right. It's a much more complicated story than we have been led to believe. That is absolutely right. So let us take advantage of the fact that we are back in our living rooms and that we can sing and we don't have to wear masks. And let us join in singing We Are with Amy and Franco.
For each child that's born, a morning star of nations, we're seekers of truth and keepers of faith, makers of peace and a wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayer. We are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of the ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Franco. Thank you, Julica and Ashley, and everyone who joined in the chat for that time for all ages. Friends, as we come into this time of prayer, this time of centering, I invite you to put down what you might be holding physically or mentally. Push back from the computer if you want. There's not really much to see on the screen for this, at least not right now. Just give yourself a little space. This week, a colleague shared a question with me that's been on my mind ever since. They asked, "Are you where your feet are now?" My answer in that moment, and in the many moments since, was a clear and resounding no. This week, these last weeks really, have had my mind so very busy again. Omicron, 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 and all the many permutations and combinations that result from that mantra, carrying my mind and my heart and my attention far, far from where my feet, far from where my body was, and into the realm of worry and anxiety, into the future, into the past, anywhere but here. Perhaps you've had similar experiences. So friends, each week when we gather for worship, we make this little oasis that we call our time of prayer and the cycle of life to create that clearing in our lives, in which we can bring our hearts and our minds and our attention into the same place our bodies are, into this moment, the only moment we can ever actually be in. So let's bring our attention here. Now, to this moment. Look around the space that you're in, if that helps. Situate your body in time and geography. Rest your hands in your lap if that feels comfortable. Notice what you notice about sensation in your body, the feel of the chair or the couch beneath you, the feel of fabric on your skin, cool air on your hands, the sensation of breath at your nostrils or the rise and fall of your chest. Let's rest in this moment as we allow the prayer of our hearts to well up in us. Spirit of life, Spirit of love, interconnected web of mutuality that binds us one to another and to this planet. In times of challenge and doubt, may we remember that we are held always by a love larger than us, by forces vaster and more powerful, more subtle than we can imagine in this dance of giving and receiving and growing with the many beings seen and unseen that make up our world. May we remember that to even be alive in this moment is a miracle, that to have the health and the strength to be present this day is not a given. May our prayer start in gratitude for this moment and ripple out. And as these gratitudes soften our hearts, let our compassion be kindled. Compassion for ourselves, compassion for those around us, compassion for the wider world. And resting in this compassion, I invite you to share out loud and in the chat those things you would like to lift up in worship today, those things you would like held in the care of this congregation. To those that you are holding in the care and the love of the congregation, I add that we hold Sarah Lindsay and her family this morning as her mom faces health challenges. May the love and the care of this congregation surround Sarah's mom, Lisa, hold Sarah and Zach too as they navigate this challenging time. They welcome your cards and your care. And our love and care surround Nancy Brown this morning as she settles into the new assisted living residence that she recently moved to. She too would welcome your cards and your letters. If you'd like to send a card to anyone mentioned in the cycle of life, please be in touch with me or any member of the staff for their addresses. And friends, as we draw our time of prayer to a close, let us remember that there is, in the words of Reverend John Cummins, but one place where time and death have no dominion, and that place is love. We pray that the grip of addiction be loosened, that the weight of oppression be lightened, that truth be told, that joy break through, and that love make every suffering bearable for us all. May it be so. Amen. And will you join me in singing Spirit of Life with Dave and Ani Peichel?
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hands, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
I think you're still muted. I can't hear you.
There it is. Thank you. You know, you'd think it's a good segue, because what I was just about to say was we are in a moment that we feel like we have been in before. It's the same old thing. We are doing it again. You would think we would know better. You would think that maybe some things would have changed, and yet here we are. And Julica and I, as we were preparing for this service, we talked about, okay, what is the sermon that is needed? And what we said is, my God, we do not need the same thing again. We do not need to repeat all of the things. And, you know, I'd gone through my files and all the MLK services that I'd preached, and I was like, I just feel so tired of this. And not only was I tired of that message, but also, you know, we had everybody in my house, including our toddler, had COVID this week. So many people are holding those things. I work at the UUA, and we are launching 30 Days of Love today. And so it was, you know, what we said was, what actually feels truer to the spirit of this day, of MLK Day, when the call from Bernice King is, we got to do something different. We need to get voting rights legislation passed. We need to do things that we haven't done because it's not working. We said, all right, we're going to do something different. And so we today have decided to share with you a live conversation that Julica and I had on Friday together. And it's about 12 minutes long. It's some thoughts that we had. And what we are going to ask you to do is to pay attention to your questions and your insights during those 12 minutes. And when we're done, we're going to have a chance in the chat for you to share those questions. We were going to respond in real time to those. And we will also have some questions for you. And so with no further ado, we give you 12 minutes of Julica and Ashley from Friday, doing things differently than we have done.
Good morning, Ashley. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, sweet friend. I'm so glad to be here with you.
It's so good that we are having this opportunity to use Zoom to our advantage, since we had to take a break from in-person worship one more time. Here we are. And we're going to have a conversation. We're going to have a conversation, you and I first, and then we're going to open it up through questions through the chat for other people to participate, which I think is excellent. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
And our topic is what we have learned, what we have been taught by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But before we go into that part of our conversation, let's acknowledge that this is not a historical abstract learning
No,
exercise.
no. Yeah, we are in a moment. I think everybody listening today probably knows the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act of 1964, what, 5, 6, 7 years ago now, 8 years. Oh my
2013.
gosh.
Yep.
And since then, various, coalitions of people have been really pushing to get some of those protections back. In the past couple of years in particular, we've seen just like the incredible and deeply racist, right, let's name that explicitly, the deeply racist disenfranchisement of thousands and millions of people. And right now, we are in a moment where the push has been around, a number of voting rights bills that have sort of come together under there's been the John Lewis Act, the For the People Act, the People's Response, all of these things. But the push right now is to get the Senate to pass it, and the block is the filibuster. And so I believe as we're recording this on a Friday, last night on Thursday, Senators Sinema and Manchin said that they were not going to go after the filibuster. And so folks are going to descend this weekend and on King Day on both of their offices and on the Capitol. We got to make it happen. This is not abstract anymore. And we are fighting literally for the same things that folks lived and died for in the 50s and 60s when Dr. King was leading and so many others.
That's right. That's right. We are continuing the work. I think we need to renew our own internal sense of how and why and lean in. This is a time for all of us to lean in.
That's right. That's right. And lean in together and do it maybe differently in some ways than our elders did in the 50s and 60s and 70s in the civil rights movement. And I think that's part of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, say more. What is it that you take as one of the core learnings from the civil rights movement and from Dr. King's work?
Well, first, I think I want to name, there's so much to talk about with Dr. King and so many things that we could go into. But one of the things that has become so clear to me, both in my love and my frustrations with him, are that he was an incredibly savvy leader who could read the political moment, right? And so when I think about the way that he and those around him shaped the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and these other organizations that they were working in, they were very intentional about seeing the political landscape and saying, we need a charismatic leader out in front. We need a very respectable in terms of, what is considered, popularly respectable for a Black leader in particular. And there were choices made, right? I think about how Bayard Rustin was pushed out for being gay, even though he was the mind behind so much of this. I think about how leaders like Ella Baker, who had a very different philosophy of organizing that, had very different politics in many ways, but was pushing for a much more leaderful movement. And say what you will about King, but he knew that to sort of address the white moderate, right, who he writes about so eloquently, there needed to be a particular face of it, and he was that. I think also, though, that was a particular moment in history, right? And part of what we have been gifted by the last 10 to 15 years of movement history is a different kind of movement for justice, where folks are no longer willing to just say, we're going to hold up one person, in part because that person is so vulnerable. We saw with King's assassination, with the assassination of others in those political moments, that when you have a figurehead like that, the movement can crumble. And so Black Lives Matter, the water protectors have all refused to do that. They have said, no, we're going to be leaderful and careful movements, right? We are going to take care of each other in different ways. And I think, we have in fact made some progress nationally in terms of our understandings of race. I think we're at a critical moment where actually we are backsliding right now. And I know that you and I often will talk in terms of the IDI, the Intercultural Development Inventory. And I want to hear what you have to say about kind of the moment we're in and the difference between what what King and the civil rights folks were in at that time.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're right. This is the thing that I feel very passionate about, because the way that we can see that we have advanced and that things have happened is because of the power of the message that Dr. King gave us with his many different metaphors and images, but especially that one of my children, your children holding hands, the content of their character, right? Like he was creating in the intercultural development inventory language, he was helping us move from polarization to minimization, which is the shift from we're very different and we could never possibly share a counter, a bathroom, whatever, to we're exactly the same. Minimization is a minimizing of differences. And that is what we needed in the 60s because we were in segregation, because Black people were not allowed, blah, 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 blah. We have the whole list. Now, when you listen to Dr. King's speeches and the accusations that he's leveling at the system, they're still alive today. Like he could be talking about the police right now. So it's not that things have been solved, that systems have changed. It's not that Black and other people of color are actually living a liberated and joyful life. I mean, we are. Many of us, people of color, are living a much more liberated and joyful life than we did before, but there's still so much more to reach for. And it's also true that culturally, there was a shift to understanding that we are the same. That is one of the biggest gifts of the civil rights movement, that we can hold hands, that we are at our core all human. And that is both a gift and a limitation. Like, if we continue to stay in this place of we're all the same, we are all, there's no difference between us, then we're not able to fully acknowledge the role of power, the role of systems, the role in which all of these different parts of our lives are impacting the way that we experience society. So it's time to move beyond this space of we are all the same. Not because it's not true, but because it's more complex. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for me, we moved from a place where it was fine to question the humanity of entire swaths of people because of, as Dr. King said, the color of their skin, right? So we moved from that to, okay, yes, we are all human. And you're right, staying in that place means then that we don't actually deal with the fact that differences do make a difference, right? And I think, that goes not just for race in this country, but for sexual orientation, for gender, for all kinds of different constellations of identity that I think that shift culturally helped us make in other arenas, right? Of who we count as human.
That's right.
I kind of look at this political moment though, right? When, just a year after an attempted coup on the government, and often the response to that, right? We're just response to the hatred, to the deep racism and the deep bigotry that has fueled the radical right for forever, right? This is not new. This is not a new upsurging, but there was a crack that has happened over the past number of years that allowed those dehumanizing views to come back through again and have purchase in popular culture without the shame that came from them following the civil rights movement.
That's right.
People knew that it was not okay to say that out loud. And so these little clusters of people kind of festered and grew. And I will not say that everywhere in the country that racism just kind of like went dormant underground or anything, but in general public discourse, right? And so I think we're at this moment where there's this resurgence of like, yeah, it's okay to the debates over critical race theory. It's okay to pretend that race doesn't exist, and it's okay to say that we're not going to have any conversation at all about this. And you look at the hate groups that are multiplying, the hate crimes that are being committed, the way that folks are engaging in everything from like gerrymandering to electing school boards, right? And I think my fear is that that backslide is going to further re-entrench this kind of lottie unity message of minimization, and that we're not going to be able to push forward with some of the more nuanced conversation that is so deeply needed. And that our movements have been pointing to for the last number of years.
That's right. That's right. So I think it would be good for us to stop this recording so that we can then invite folks to join this conversation live on Sunday morning. And so that we can say, so now what? So what does this mean? If this is where we are, if this is where we've been, what does this moment call us to do?
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound good?
That sounds great. Thanks,
Okay.
Julica.
Thank you.
We had some interesting things to say on Friday, didn't we, Julica?
We did, and we said it all in one take. I'm very impressed. And I see that folks have already started engaging in the chat. Thank you. Good. Yes. I think that before we engage more deeply in the actual questions that you bring into this conversation, we're going to invite you to notice, how are you feeling right now? That's the first thing to notice. How does this conversation about Dr. King and about where we are, where we've been, where we need to go, how does that make you feel? We would love to see in the chat if you're willing to share. I feel stimulated and curious and frustrated. Like I feel a lot of different feelings of like, and wanting to have things happen. Agitated, discouraged, frustrated with white people, hopeless. Yeah, that's real. Anger, unsure. Yeah, how do we rise? Curious, anxious because I don't understand what to do differently. Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, that's real. How are you feeling, Ashley?
I think there's some weary in there. Tired of the iterative cycle. We do the same thing. But also, so much of my work is about being with folks who are trying to learn what is harvestable and to do new things with it. And so, joy and woe are woven fine. And I think there's always that tension, that balance for me. And where I feel that is in my belly. I feel sort of like rumbling of wanting to move, wanting to act.
Yeah. Thank you, all of you who are sharing. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think I would be so interested to see how this would change if we were living in an alternate universe in which the pandemic weren't happening, right? Because there's, I think one of the things that the pandemic has done is to show us that, so many of us would get up and go to the protest or show up for the meeting, or, when something would happen, when something would be revealed, we would have these kind of staple ways of getting that energy out. And I think because those are so largely unavailable to us right now, it's both extraordinarily disheartening because we don't have a channel for that. But I think it's also showing that those tactics were more about our feelings in some ways than they were about actually creating change in this time, in this moment. the marches of the 60s were incredibly effective. And I think what we've shown is that some of those same tactics don't work in the same way now that they did. And so we're having to get creative, and it's fascinating to watch what folks come up with.
Yes. And the pandemic is also pushing us to break things that we thought we're going to break a long time from now, if at all. Like, they already broke. So many things are already different and pushing us. And if we can tolerate this level of uncertainty and continue to stay in it together and continue to find creative ways to feel together while we are feeling so tired, so separate. Here we are worshiping online again. Like, where can we gather and center energetically and understand that this is part of a larger journey that is already preparing us, and that is going to give us so much more capacity than we had before. I do lean towards optimism. I mean, I have to, like, that's just how I am. If I ever lose my optimism, I will leave this ministry. I will leave this job. Like, I cannot do this work if I don't believe that something good can happen from it. But it's not by ignoring the tired or the I don't want to or the oh my God, please not again. There's an alchemy that we need to sort of pivot and lean into.
Yeah. And I think, Julica, I think it's important to acknowledge, the famous quote that is often attributed to King is, "The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice." He was quoting Theodore Parker, a Unitarian minister from the 1800s, who was an abolitionist, and who's, that theological optimism is actually a deep part of our religious tradition as Unitarian Universalists, sometimes to our detriment, right? We've been overly rosy or optimistic, but I think what you're talking about is how do we face what is real while not losing hope? And I know so many of you in this congregation because of my relationship just here locally and through my partner, Karen Hutt, who's also one of your ministers. But I serve as the organizing strategy director at the Unitarian Universalist Association. We didn't really do an intro. Sorry about that, everybody. But my day job is I run Side with Love and the outward-facing justice ministries of our association with an incredible team of people who are just so brilliant and so skilled. And over the last 2.5 years that I've been in that role, we have been pivoting and adapting as things have changed. But also we've been building what in my mind some days is the machinery of hope that gets me through.
Yes.
I think, as I was growing up and as previously in our iteration as Unitarian Universalists, I think we did a lot of sort of what we called public witness, where folks would go out into the world and, wear our t-shirts, share our values. But we never got really serious about investing in the infrastructure to help us do something more effective, to really bring us into community and connection, not just in an individual congregation, but across Unitarian Universalism. And as we have been building and organizing infrastructure, right, of training leaders, creating opportunities for folks to take action locally and nationally. We use what we call a distributed campaign model. It is the thing that is keeping us, the folks on my team, going. Because, when there is a coup or when there an attempted coup, when there is the gerrymandering that we're seeing, when there is another killing of somebody by the police, when, all of these things, we are no longer in a place where we are hand wringing, because there is always something we can do. And when we see hundreds or thousands of people across the country show up for a phone bank or organize an action in their local community, while other people are doing the same thing at the same time, that to me is what keeps me going and gives me hope. That it is the machinery of hope for me. And I think that to me is that's the other end of the pendulum, right? So like there's this team of folks where what we're doing is not trying to all get in line behind a single leader or a single theory, but what we're trying to do is equip hundreds of leaders in hundreds of places to do what makes sense in their local context, while also feeding their spirits, rooting in our tradition that will carry us through, working to play well with others in partnership out in the world. And that's my soapbox here. We probably need to start wrapping up here about the things, but I want to let you respond to that, Julica.
No, and I appreciate, thank you all who are responding in the chat in real time. I feel hope as I hear you talk, as do others in the congregation, Ashley. Thank you. It has to go beyond the hand wringing. It has to go into the next piece. And I know that you have a suggestion for us, an immediate call to action. Before I invite you to do that, I want to read something from Arundhati Roy that I think really speaks to this moment. And we've shared it in worship before, but good things bear repeating. She says, our strategy should be not only to confront empire, but to lay siege to it, to deprive it of oxygen, to shame it, to mock it with our art, our music, our literature, our stubbornness, our joy, our brilliance, our sheer relentlessness, and our ability to tell our own stories. Stories that are different from the ones we're being brainwashed to believe. Remember this, we be many and they be few. They need us more than we need them. Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. Okay, so call us to action, friend. What are we gonna do?
All right, I wouldn't be an organizer if I didn't tell you that we have a goal over at Side with Love today of 500 people across the country making calls to their senators to get this done and pass voting rights legislation. Our partners who are part of these voting rights coalitions, in particular, the Declaration for American Democracy, DFAD, is saying this voting rights bill is not dead in the water. There is still a window with Sinema and with Joe Manchin. And I just want to respond to something in the chat, which is, it is not about changing their minds. It is about doing what Arundhati Roy says here, which is making it impossible for them to be on the wrong side. And that's where mass action comes in. This is not about like, oh, if we just tell you the right facts, you're going to get there. This is about making it politically, logistically impossible to not do the right thing. So today, we are going to share with you in the chat. It is also in your virtual order of service. We have a 5-minute ask for you. At Side with Love and You the Vote, we have set up a one-click link where you go, you put in your name, your where you live, and it will automatically, you click one button, it will automatically on your cell phone connect you to your senator's offices. And we will leave them a million messages. We will send them the things. Julica tried this yesterday. I made her do it and it was super easy. It took what, like 5-6 minutes total?
Yeah, it actually took 2 minutes to get through to my first senator, and then the second one took 6 minutes because they put me on hold. But it was
at Klobuchar's office. Okay.
Yeah, at Klobuchar's office.
So what we're gonna put this chat in the chat. I am gonna ask you right now to everybody commit to taking this 5 minutes of action. Give us a yes, I will in the chat. And after the service, we're going to ask everybody, as you are praying with your fingertips and dialing these numbers, leaving your messages to do this with us today. And I'm going to pass it over, I think, now to Arif. Julica, I just want to thank you for this conversation. I want to thank everybody in the chat for engaging with us. And forward together, friends.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you for your ministry.
My goodness. Ashley and Julica, thank you. Thank you for that message. Thank you for inspiring us. Thank you for the very concrete call to action. Y'all probably see in the chat the many, many, many people that are saying yes, that are saying I will, that are saying we will. Truly, that message was a gift to us, and we were fortunate to receive it. And I know that I will go back and listen to this again, listening for the places where what you have shared, what you have brought forth is comforting to me, as well as for the places where what you're sharing is challenging me, is inviting me to stretch and grow and learn and move forward. So friends, each week when we gather, we make time for the spiritual practice of generosity. So in the same way as Ashley and Julica so generously gave us that message and we received it, we're inviting you to give this morning to the Minister's Emergency Fund of the congregation. If you are not familiar with this fund, this is a fund that is available to use to support people in the congregation who have run into some financial challenges and need some help. And what I want you to know is that in these last couple of weeks, as the pandemic, as you know, the latest variant of COVID has risen and impacted our communities. Things are getting harder for more people in this congregation. In these last few weeks, people are coming forward. They are asking for support from the Minister's Emergency Fund, things like medical bills, things like rent, things like being able to get access to food. And so what I'm inviting you to do this morning is to give to support the Minister's Emergency Fund. We're going to have links up in just a moment for how you can give. And after you have given to this offering, if you are able, after the service is over, we invite you to click on that link that we will drop in the chat so that you can be part of this action that Ashley has invited us into. So it's a two-part offering today, an invitation to give to support the Minister's Emergency Fund, and an opportunity to give of your time and your energy in contacting senators about voting rights. I encourage you to be as generous as you're able, and we will receive the gift of music from Amy and Franco in our offertory, Building a New Way.
Dear ones, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. wrote in his famous words in the letter from a Birmingham jail, I am cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Never again can we afford to live with the narrow provincial outside agitator idea. Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere in this country. Beloveds, we are insiders with each other. The work is ours to do together in this inescapable network of mutuality. It is ours to do, it is ours to continue, it is ours to pick up, and it is ours to imagine into the future. As we do it together, may we find time to root deeply, to drink from the wells that sustain our spirits, to take our shifts for the revolution, and to love one another until the world we imagine comes into being. Blessings on all of you. Amen.